So eventually, the material was owned by a company called Cotter Corporation, and they shipped much of it to their processing facility in Cannon City, Colorado. But they had 8,700 tons of leached barium sulfate remaining and a number of other materials. And they tried to find locations and disposal sites that would accept this material. They wrote Weldon Spring a couple times. Weldon Spring is a local area here about 30 miles from the airport site that was processing uranium and making TNT for the Department of Defense in the Cold War. Weldon Spring denied it. They said they didn't want the material. So ultimately what happened is Cotter Corporation decided, in some sort of fit of creative brilliance, they decided to mix the 8,700 tons of leached barium sulfate with what they called 39,000 tons of quote-unquote topsoil. And then they figured that the licensable levels of uranium had then been diluted to the point that it was no longer worthy of a license. And then they illegally dumped it at the Westlake landfill, lying to the landfill operator, telling them that this was quote-unquote clean fill dirt.
And from what I'm reading, over the course of the time that they moved that material, and this is a gargantuan amount of material that we're talking about, I believe that there were 3,000 truckloads of this materials taken to the Westlake fill. And I've even found, and I asked Don Chapman about this, I found a report where a man, I think he went unnamed when he was giving his report, but he witnessed back in the 70s, the digging of large trenches within the Westlake landfill into which they drove 18-wheelers, buried them, and walked away.
There's some astounding stories, and Michael, I have a penchant for combing over primary sources.
Yes.
In one of the other shows that we did on Electric Pyramid, I talked about my work in regard to American history and discovering who named the United States of America, because I was so attentive to these rare primary sources. And what we find when we look at the primary source record is that there are inconsistencies, and there's certainly motivation, perhaps, at the time to not offer complete depictions of what was really going on.
That's a nice way of putting it.
One of our friends, Denise Brock, who is the ombudsman for NIOSH with the CDC. And Denise Brock is an amazing, inspirational story. She has secured many billions of dollars in compensation for atomic energy workers, and specifically dealing with the Mallinckrodt workers. And she states in no uncertain terms that the Mallinckrodt records in many cases were destroyed or even altered. And so, it's you have to be kind of in a sleuthing mood, if you will, to start to piece this narrative together and understand, why is it that out of the 100 contaminated sites in St. Louis, I mentioned earlier the Coldwater sites, the airport site, the downtown Mallinckrodt plant itself, and the vicinity properties equals about 100 contaminated sites. Why is it that those 100 sites have been put under the pertinent federal cleanup program for nuclear weapons-related waste, but Westlake has been excluded? And that's a real crucial question there, because when you're talking about 43,000 to 48,000 tons of radiologically contaminated material laying on the surface in the heart of a county of 1 million people, and the fact that you have this, basically endless finger pointing between multinational conglomerates like Exelon and Republic Services and the Department of Energy and the EPA and the congressional delegation. Everybody's kind of orbiting around this issue, and they're never coming to grips with the fact that this material cannot remain safely in this community. It has to be removed.